Hello again, and welcome to WordPress Accessibility Day. My name is Danielle, and I'm the founder of Overnight Website and Kinetic Iris Web Development Studio. Thank you for joining us for Accessibility of Common Gutenberg Blocks with Graham Armfield. Graham works with organizations to help them improve the accessibility of their websites, testing the websites for accessibility and advising the designers and developers on how to fix issues found. He has written detailed training courses on accessibility for developers, which he presents on a regular basis. Please feel free to add your questions in the Q&A tab next to the video, and we'll answer them at the end of the session, and use the ideas section to chat with other attendees. So take it away, Graham.
Thanks, Danielle, and welcome everyone to Accessibility of Common Gutenberg Blocks. So it was a good introduction, and so I don't need to say any more here. I've built many accessible websites using WordPress over the years, and have contributed something to accessibility in the core. I've still got a couple of things in there which have improved accessibility. So I don't need to say anything more about myself. Let's just get straight in. And firstly, I want to talk about what this presentation is not about. Over the years, since Gutenberg first arrived on the scene, there's been a lot of talk about the accessibility of the editor in the admin area. And yeah, it was a bit of a dreadful mess to start with. It has been improved over the years, I'm pleased to say, but it kind of put me off using Gutenberg, really, and I've never really done much with it. But I actually have one of my own websites needs a bit of TLC, and so I thought maybe it's time to start embracing Gutenberg, and I just wanted to see what it was like from an accessibility perspective. Most of the clients that I've worked with over the years are not at all technical people. They don't really know much about HTML or anything like that, or Gutenberg or accessibility. They just want it to work and to sell their products and services. So I wanted to see what it would be like if I just picked up some of the Gutenberg blocks and actually saw what sort of accessible delivery that enabled. So stuff that the site visitor actually gets in the browser. So I'm not going to talk about the admin area at all, apart from enabling and disabling some plugins. So why accessibility is important, I'm sure you've had little people talking about this throughout the sessions. Companies get involved in accessibility for two reasons. Partly they don't want to get sued, but the other reason, which is perhaps the more positive reason, is that they want to increase their customer base, or the potential customer base, because when you add up all the people who have access needs that are perhaps different to yours, it's maybe about 20% of the population. And accessibility can help everybody. This picture here is the hill that leads up from the Thames in London up to St Paul's Cathedral. In the background, it was originally a road, but when the Millennium Bridge was finished, it was turned into like a gentle staircase. But they also put in this ramp that you can see crossing the photograph, and it's there for wheelchair users and people using buggies, pushchairs, whatever. But if you stand here on this wet November afternoon about 3 or 4 years ago, you can see that actually most people prefer to use the ramp rather than the stairs. So it's a kind of showing you that these features are used by many people, perhaps more than was originally intended. So the test that I did, most of this presentation is going to be a little bit of a live presentation on some screens in my browser, but I did some detailed tests using my Windows 10 laptop, the latest Firefox and Chrome browsers. I had WordPress 6.0.2 running. I know that's not the latest version, but when I did the tests, it was the latest version. I was using 2021 theme, and the screen reader was NVDA 2022.2.3, which is almost the latest version. Okay, now there are hundreds and hundreds of Gutenberg blocks. I couldn't cover all of them, obviously. I did pick up some of the core ones to start with, and these are ones that are available on every install of WordPress now. I also I reached out and asked some people which were the other popular ones, and I chose some from CoBlocks, some from Stackable, and some from Cadence. I certainly didn't choose all of the blocks that are available from these people, and we'll see what we have time to cover. And yeah, I've only got a short time, so I can't cover everything, and so I'm only going to cover some common accessibility issues. And so I'm focusing more on keyboard interaction because a lot of people actually choose to or have to use a keyboard instead of a mouse or a trackpad. And I also did some tests with NVDA Screen Reader. It's a popular screen reader that's free to download on Windows machines. And there's one or two other things that I might mention as well. So let's get going. I'm going to come out of the presentation now, and you can see a screen on a test WordPress website that I've put together. The first page we're looking at is simple stuff. I've pulled together some of the simpler building block type blocks from the core, these are all core blocks on this page. And so we've got a list of items. We've got some headings here, heading level 2, heading level 3, etc. Paragraphs as an ordered list, like a numbered list. There was a bullet list at the top, and then block quotes and verses. Now, this is all simple stuff, and you'll be pleased to know that all of this basic building block stuff is all perfectly accessible. So I'm not going to talk any more about that, really. Let's move on to the next one, where I've got the opportunity of putting tables into a page. That is a core block. I can do a table like this. I've mocked this up. It's a list of events that are happening at the Student Union campus, and I've got a table, and I was able, using the core block, to add column headers. There is now, I need to look at my notes. Where are they? Okay. There's no way to add a caption to this table, though, using the block. A caption is like the alternate text for this table. It's basically a label that you can set on the table to say what this table is showing you. Something like a list of the events in the student campus or something like that. There's no way of doing that using the block itself. So that's not great. Also, these heading cells, they are marked up as headers, but it's missing the scope attribute, which would be useful for some screen readers. Some screen readers cope with that fine, others maybe not. I've also tried to create a table like a product comparison table would be, where I've got features down the left-hand side and some products across the top. Obviously, once again, put together just as an example here. So here I've got column headers like feature, Austin Mini, and Escort Mark 1 van. And then I have row headers. Now, sadly, in the plugin at the moment, the core block, there is no way of adding row headers. So this table, I actually put these in by hand just to see if it was feasible that way. It is, but using the block itself, and if someone has no technical knowledge and they won't know what to do, then there's no way of doing a suitable, like something like that, like a product comparison table. Okay, moving on. That's all about tables I'm going to talk about. The next one I'm going to look at is media, which is effectively images. So I've added some images to the site, to this page. I've got the plain image with a caption. I've also set the alternate text, and that is revealed there. So it's good for screen reader users as well. The next one I tried was the cover image. Now this puts text directly on top of an image. So I chose to actually darken use a darker overlay on the image just to make the text visible, because of course if you have a light image with light text, then it can make the text quite difficult to read, but I was able to sort that out, so that's good. The next one I've got is this media and text block. So I've got a picture of a guitar here with some text next to it. Down the bottom here I've got the gallery, and these are quite good because two of these are interactive elements, because I set them up to show you This one shows you the larger image. You can see I've tabbed to this and it has got good, a good focus indication there. If I press the tab key again, once again, a good focus indication. The third image doesn't have any functionality attached to it. But if I go to Wembury Beach and the alternate text for this image is set appropriately, if I press the enter key now, you can see it shows me a full-size image. However, if you look at the underlying code here, which I shall, the image itself, the alt attribute, which is how you set the alternate text, is actually set to a URL. This is no good at all, and it really ought to be set to the alternate text that's stored in the database. WordPress has alternate text stored against this image, but it's not retrieving it. So that's a slight issue. It's better than perhaps the classic editor because there was no alt attribute there at all in the classic editor, but it could be better, definitely. Okay, so let's get rid of that and go back to where I was before. So that's all the images, and that's all of the core Gutenberg blocks that I looked at. I have 3 other pages that I've set up for the other blocks that I'm looking at. But what I'll need to do first is enable the plugins for these. Let's do the CoBlocks ones first. So let's activate that one. Slightly frustratingly, if I have all of these plugins going at once, they do kind of contend with each other a little bit. So that's a bit unfortunate if you want to use some CoBlocks blocks, some stackable blocks and some cadence blocks, but I guess one day that will help. Okay, so here we are on the CoBlocks page. Now, the first one I've got is a hero image. Where's my notes again? Once again, I've got text directly on the image, but I've specifically chosen a darker image here. This was taken almost at sunset, and so the text shows up quite nicely. But if you had a light image, I'm sure it's possible to change the color of this text appropriately. But it would be nice to be able to put some kind of underlay under there. I've got these links here. The first one, I don't know why the hover means it disappears. I'll have to investigate further why that is. Also, they do have good focus indication. I've tabbed to the first link now and then the second one. And this, you can set the link text how you want. So that's okay. The next elements are accordions. And this uses the more modern HTML5 summary and details elements, which are now widely supported by browsers and also assistive technologies like screen readers. So that's good. I can click on these things and that works okay. And they do work fine in screen readers. But the actual keyboard focus that's set on this, and I couldn't change this, is very subtle. You can see there's a focus ring around this more information one. If I do Shift Tab, you can see where I've made the accordion have a dark background. The keyboard focus indication is completely, almost invisible, basically. The next thing on this page is highlighted text, and literally it's just changing the color of the text. So that's not a problem. You can choose, combinations that work for you. The one after that was a tweet this. What this actually does is it tweets this page, so it's like a share thing. If I tab to that, it actually disappears because it sets the background image of the button to white and there's white text on top of it. Maybe there's a way of changing that, but I haven't found it yet. And it also for screen readers, this is not that informative really. To just say tweet as the link text here, it's not really telling me enough. It doesn't tell me exactly what it does, but there we go. So that could be better. The next thing we've got on this page is a carousel, a nice big wide image here. And if I click on these images, you can see it changes them. Now, you'll notice that there's a subtle focus indication there. Notice the white dots, which when I hover over it, they turn black. If I press the tab key, quite difficult to see, but they do work. Now, if I press the enter key now, it does change the image. So the keyboard functionality is quite good there, except that if I do Shift Tab and then Shift Tab again, I have moved keyboard focus up the page. You can't tell, but it is now, this big image here has got focus. They've done that. I don't know why they've done that, because there's no functionality. I'm clicking on this image at the moment and nothing's happening. A screen reader user will, when they arrive at this image, they'll get the alternate text okay, but it will tell them it's clickable, because there is some kind of trigger that says they think actually something happens here, because images wouldn't normally get focus, and so that's a little bit confusing. So let's move focus down here so I know where it is. Have I got anything else to say about that? Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, these actual, from a screen reader user's perspective, these images here are in a button, which is good because buttons are things that trigger functionality, and the image itself has some appropriate alternate text. If only I could find it. There we go. Wembury Beach down in Devon. However, the button itself, they've actually given it ARIA label. Now, ARIA label is useful thing to give something an accessible label, but what it does is it overrides whatever was the accessible label before, in this case, which was Wembury Beach. But now the ARIA label for all of these buttons is set to gallery thumbnail. So that's much less useful for screen reader users, because they don't get to hear Wembury Beach. They get to hear that it's a button for gallery thumbnail. There's also a tab index of 0 on that, unnecessary since buttons get focus anyway. Okay, we'll keep the code window open for a bit. Let's move down to here. So I've got keyboard focus is currently on this image here. If I tab and tab again, it's on the last of those 3 images. What's next on the page is, actually I will get rid of that, is this offset with lightbox block, where I can do, there's like a gallery, but I can actually click on these and it shows me a lightbox. So that's fine. So mouse users are catered for. Now, if I press the tab key, focus is actually on this image up here. I'd expect these images to get focus, because I want keyboard users to be able to trigger the lightbox too. But if I press the tab key, you'll see that focus ends up on the code blocks form. So it's completely missed out all of these images, even though they are actually interactive elements. So that's a huge problem for keyboard users here. If I click on this one, you can see it does deliver a lightbox. Now, ironically, when this is open, I can actually use the left and right arrow keys to actually swivel through the images. There's nothing to tell me that that happens, but of course, as a keyboard user, I wouldn't ever be here because I can't trigger the lightbox. Also, for screen readers, what's the note about screen readers here? Okay. Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong bit. Okay, these images have no alt attribute, which is not good, and because focus is not transferred into the lightbox, it's still on the underlying page, so I can't access these buttons at all. So that's not great. So let's get rid of that. It does listen out for the escape key, so some keyboard accessibility is catered for, but just not letting you get into the lightbox in the first place. Right, let's move focus onto the form. The next thing I've got here, I've created this little form in using the CodeBlocks rock, and it's got name, first and last, phone, email, etc. Now, happily, most of this form is pretty good from an accessibility perspective. The focus indication is good. You can see a nice clear dotted line around that thing, around the input field. But for screen reader users, there's a problem with this first one. There is actually a code error in the block, which means that the first and last name, which is a common thing you'll see in websites, these are not linked up with the label. So, because what's important when you're putting a form together is that the label here, the prompt for the form, is programmatically linked to the input field. That's not the case with these two, because there's obviously been a mistake in the way it's been put together. So I don't get any useful information from the first and last name bits at the top. The other problem with this form is that here I've got a radio button group that I added. It's asking me whether I want sugar in my coffee. So I've got a yes, no option there. When I tab to this or move to this in a screen reader, it will tell me that the label for this radio button is yes and then no, but it doesn't read out the question when I'm using NVDA because it's not in a field set and a legend. You need, wherever you've got a radio button group, you need to use field set and legend to help everyone understand what's going on. So there we go. That's so the form's pretty good. The submit button is fine as well. And then the only other CodeBlocks block I used was this pricing table just to see how it put out. It's all plain text with these links here. And then this is down to however you choose the link text, whether or not that's accessible. So that's all fine. So there we go. That's the CodeBlocks blocks. Now, before we move on to Stackable, I'll need to deactivate CodeBlocks. And this is a little bit annoying. Every time you deactivate CodeBlocks, it wants to know why. So which one was I going to do next? Stackable. Right. Okay, so let's find that one. Okay, Stackable's running now, so we can go to the Stackable page. Okay, and first one I chose was the hero title block, and you know, a similar sort of thing. I've used an image as a background, then I've got some text and a link on top of that. You know, you can customize the colors how you want, so that's good. I could quite easily set that up so it was hard to read the text on the image, but actually, assuming you have the good enough contrast, it's fine. Let's move down in my notes, and the next one I'm going to talk about is these accordions. Once again, these are done using the HTML5 summary and details elements, and that's good. So if I tab to them, nice, very clear keyboard focus indication and an action and without any problems. And screen readers all support summary and details now, so that's all good. The next one's an interesting one, the show more or less. And if I tab down to that, good, you know, there's a focus indication there. And this works a little bit like an accordion, but if you look at the text above here, when I press the enter key, what it does is it actually replaces the text that was here earlier with some newer text, presumably some more expanded text. But focus stays on the button, which is very good. The only problem with this is that screen reader users, like it if it's an accordion, when you open an accordion, the new content appears beneath, and most screen reader users will assume that the new content is going to appear beneath. In this case, the content is changed above where you are on the screen. So a lot of screen reader users will not find the amended text. Okay. Next one, button group. How are we doing for time? Okay. These button groups, you can see that these are all for social media, the social media icons on the page, Facebook, Twitter, that's Instagram, and then YouTube. Okay, so if I hover over these, there's a subtle change for hover. Focus is on here at the moment. Let me change, let me do a tab key. Now, you probably won't be able to see it. I can only just see it. Focus is now on the Facebook icon. And if I press the tab key again, there's a very, very brief change of the sort of like, I think it's the border of the thing itself, or maybe it grows in size slightly. If I press the tab key again, so this is not good from a keyboard perspective. These links are active. I could actually take you to, if I'm on the YouTube one, if I press the enter key, it will actually take me to my YouTube channel. So let's go back to where we were. Now, I think I need to ensure that we're in the right place now. Yeah, okay. On some of these things, focus seems to sort of disappear all over the place, which is not good from a keyboard user's perspective. Now, so keyboard users can sort of use these, but the real problem is what happens for screen reader users. If we look at these elements, they are links, But what the link contains is an SVG file. Now, that's not a surprise to you, okay? But the SVG file, as it's defined here, has no accessible content at all. So a screen reader user will know that there's a link there because the screen reader will recognize the A tag, but there is nothing meaningful inside that link to tell screen reader users what it's for. So that is a completely useless block from an accessibility perspective, and because it's not really good for keyboard users, and it certainly isn't good for screen reader users either. Okay, so what else have we got on this page? And the other block I've chosen is cards, and I've put two of these together. Let's move that out of the way. And these are fine. It's got an image at the top that's got the correct alternate text attached to it. I've got a heading in here and then some plain text. I put a link in this one. And these also are links at the bottom. Interestingly, if I tab to it, these links disappear. Once again, this seems to be a problem with some of these blocks, or maybe it's just the theme settings, I don't know. But when I tab to these things, they just disappear because the background color changes to the same as the font color, which is a bit awkward, really. Okay, that is all of the stackable ones that I'm going to demo. I've got some time left, so I'm going to have a quick look at some cadence blocks. So once again, going back to plugins, let's get stackable and deactivate them and activate cadence. And we'll move to the cadence page. Okay. Some good stuff in here, actually, I was pleased to discover. So the first thing is what they've got a block called table of contents, which is a nice idea. If you've got a very long blog post with lots of headings, this is the block for you. It helps people find parts of the page they might be interested in because they're in-page links down to the headings, and that works quite nicely. As long as you've got headings set up properly, that is, including it takes into account like your heading levels, your heading hierarchy, so that's quite good. The only thing that's wrong here really with this is that that is an obvious candidate to be made a heading, but it isn't, it's just bold text. That's my only criticism of the table of contents thing. Okay. Further down the page, we've got accordions. Now, these are not done with summary and details. These are done with the slightly older method of doing accordions, but they are perfectly accessible. If I was building an accordion myself and not using summary and details, this is exactly how I would do it. I could click on them and they've got a nice, good keyboard focus indication, and they are good for screen readers as well because they use all the necessary ARIA attributes to make it perfectly accessible, which is good. Moving on. Next one I've got is a tab panel. There's a slight problem with the appearance of this one because tab 3 is not as high as the other two, but this is pretty good. Where's keyboard focus is here. If I tab to the tab panel, this is the focus is there. It's on this panel at the moment. It disappears immediately though. That's a problem because it's not you're not certain now where keyboard focus is. It actually uses the official way of doing tab panels from keyboard operability and accessibility. So I've tabbed to the first tab header. If I want to move to any of the other tab headers with using a keyboard, I will actually use the left and right arrow keys. I'll press the right arrow key now, and we can see that it's moved to the second one and then the third one. And I'm using the left arrow key to move back to where I was before. That's pretty good. That's exactly how you should build a tab panel to work. But also the ARIA underneath is absolutely correct as well. So that's pretty good actually, apart from the slight appearance problem here, and the fact that the keyboard focus disappears very quickly. Okay, underneath it's a testimonial block. There's nothing much going on in here, so I won't say anything more about that. Now we've got the gallery and lightbox. Click on that, and yeah, it shows me a lightbox again, and which is good. So let's get rid of that. Now I'm going to put focus back up here, so I know exactly where focus is. Focus is on the tab panel at the moment. If I press the tab key, I would expect focus to end up here. There's nothing in the testimonial that's interactive. I would expect focus to end up here when I press the tab key. Okay, now focus does end up on that image, but it has absolutely no focus indication. Okay, I can press the enter key, and it does show me the light box. Now, if I press the tab key to try and move to any of these, as if I'm a sighted keyboard user, I want to potentially get to these buttons to move through the images or close the light box. If I press the tab key, nothing happens, but actually I'm still on the underlying page, so that is a problem. But with the light box, you always want, when I open the light box, for focus to be put inside the light box. Otherwise, keyboard users are not really going to know what's going on, and it can't really use it. Now, it does have the left and right arrow functionality, as the other one I showed you before did have. And also, I can press the escape key. So it kind of is keyboard accessible, but there's nothing anywhere to tell the user what keystrokes are relevant, and also the focus indication on the actual images could be nice. Okay, so I'm thinking that focus indication is going to be on that first image. There it is. Now the next thing that's going to get focus is this info box here, which is effectively one big link. So let me press the tab key again and again, and now when I press the tab key, focus will go to the info box. Notice that the focus indication is there in a, well, you might not even have seen it across the web there. It flashes very, very briefly. It's less than a second. Focus indications, if they just immediately disappear, that's not at all helpful. Okay. Now focus is it's on that. It actually is a link. The whole thing is a link back to the simple stuff page. Whatever you put in here effectively becomes the link text. Then, you know, since it's going back to one of the other block pages, that's probably not appropriate text, but that's down to what you choose to put in it. Okay, what am I doing for time? I think I'm okay. Let's move down and look, I've done a form here as well. And I'm very pleased to relate that this form is generally pretty good from an accessibility perspective. I've got nice focus indication going on here on all of these things. I can tab to each of them. And this works okay. That's a select. The only slight problem here is these radio buttons. They're very, very tiny. They're almost like tinier than perhaps the native ones. I don't know. I'm not quite sure how that's done, but they're very, very small. They work okay, except for the fact that, like the other form I showed you before, these are not contained in a field set or with a legend. So I will hear that this radio button is for eat in, take away, and delivery. Now, I might guess that that is about delivery, about my options for how I want my food, but it doesn't read out eating options in a screen reader because it's not marked up in a field set in a legend. That would be really nice. Otherwise, this form is very good, because if I submit this form, having indicated that these fields are all mandatory, and that it could be slightly better from a screen reader user perspective if they used ARIA required on there. If I submit the form, it produces appropriate error messages, and these are all accessible as well to a screen reader. So that is really, really good. So yeah, that's nice. What else can I say about this? That's it. Okay, so that's all of the cadence blocks that I've covered. There we go. So that's pretty good, actually. Most of that stuff's pretty good. A few tweaks here and there. That could be much better. Now let's move back into my training display. Sorry, my presentation. It's a bit early in the morning here, half asleep still, sorry. Yeah, now I have found some issues, and I started doing the testing a few weeks ago, and I found some issues, and I have reported some of them, and already some have been fixed. I think in the CoBlocks ones, a couple of the issues have already been fixed, which is nice. So it's good that the plugin authors are responding to that. There are some which I haven't reported yet, which I will. There are others, I think I can't remember, I'm not going to say who, but where I did get pushback on something. So I'm going to have to work a bit harder to get people to actually improve stuff. So there we go. That is my quick demo of some access and some Gutenberg blocks, looking at the accessibility for your site visitors. And that is it from my presentation. Okay.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for all of that really useful information. I find it especially useful for the block libraries, these plugins, because I won't often install other random ones. I tend to stick with the core ones. So I really liked the walkthrough and seeing sort of which one is ahead of the others for right now.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it's a bit of a frustration, as I mentioned, that if you want sort of some CoBlocks ones and some stackable ones and some Cadence, if you have all three plugins running, some of them just don't work properly, which is a real pain, basically.
Yeah, and really interesting. I'm sure there's lots of workarounds that people are starting to figure out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we have a couple of questions for now. So as a reminder to anyone watching, you can enter your questions in the Q&A tab next to the live stream. So our first question is, do any of the block providers give information about the accessibility of the blocks in their libraries? Or was all of this started, you had no idea what you were getting into?
It was really the latter there. I had no idea what I was getting into. As I mentioned before, I kind of stayed away from Gutenberg because I was so disenchanted with the accessibility of the admin area. I kind of avoided using it. I'm still using the classic editor on most of the websites that I'm doing, or all of the websites that I have built for myself. I had no information at all, and I chose those three plugins. I did look at a couple of others as well, but these were nice, so good ones to look at, based on advice from other people. But I have found no information at all on those plugins about accessibility. Now, I'm not saying there isn't any, but I haven't found any information.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's a lot of people are still learning about accessibility, and it's good they are learning, but it's not still quite in the mainstream enough, really.
Yeah, I mean, our next question is kind of, you've sort of answered it a bit. Do you recommend Gutenberg for accessibility, or will people need to check somewhere else?
Well,
it's kind of a loaded question.
Yeah, I mean, if you're running a website, and you're setting up a brand new website for your company, you can certainly, just pick up, like I did, one of the default themes, WordPress default themes, and start using it straight away, and you can get a good output. If you stick with the core blocks, then generally that's pretty good. I mentioned with the tables one, there's some limitations there as to what you can do. I didn't obviously do every single core block, but so there, that's pretty good, and you can style them how you want. And now, given it's site editing rather than content editing, I suppose if you persevered, you could actually end up with a good website that was fairly good from an accessibility perspective. In the olden days, when with Classic Editor, you would need to get a developer like me and like thousands of others to actually build you a theme, and then the accessibility of your website is governed partly by your own content author knowledge of accessibility, but also how the theme developer has put the theme together. So it's quite easy to bake inaccessible features into a WordPress theme. The default themes are generally pretty good, and so I think it's not. I think it's probably not one that you want to avoid. But if if you stick with the core elements, then the chances are you're gonna end up with a pretty accessible website.
And because they're core, they're easier to extend in those different ways. Like we have a question about can I put ARIA values in WordPress? And I don't recall there being a way to go that deep. I know there's a plugin that allows you to do screen reader text and different things. But I would assume that hooking into these blocks would allow you to kind of manipulate them and add those ARIA values.
Then obviously you can, if you've got the knowledge, then you can go and edit the code yourself. With the ARIA, I would be very cautious. I've trained a lot of people, a lot of developers in accessibility, and I've reviewed a lot of websites for accessibility. One of the common problems is that people use ARIA in the wrong place and the wrong ARIA attributes. And if you use ARIA incorrectly, it can be often a lot worse for accessibility than just not using it at all. So I'd be very, very cautious about adding your own ARIA values. Also, in the case of like the old wave way of doing an accordion, you need to tweak the values of the ARIA attributes when the accordion opens and when it closes. Now, that's something that's done in scripting. So you'd have to get into the actual JavaScript to actually start making sure that the ARIA has the correct values there. So that's, if you know what you're doing, then yes, of course you can do it. If you don't know what you're doing, I would caution against doing that.
Yeah. I think there's that balance between giving the users the ability to do anything in the editor, and then like sort of, should we put this? Is this the thing we should be adding in the first place?
Yeah, with those ones with the accordion stuff, I think it was the cadence blocks that I looked at, the accordion and the tab panel. Someone has put a lot of effort into getting that right from an accessibility perspective. I didn't change any of the code on that at all, and the ARIA is correct, and it's tweaked by the JavaScript appropriately when the views change. So someone has put in some effort in somewhere certainly for cadence, definitely, and some of the other ones as well. Whether it was done by accident or whether it was done on purpose is another matter. But
right.
So,
I mean, that's obviously something to sort of look out for as a developer. If you're looking to manipulate those values, maybe try to find some kind of plugin that lets you do that, but still hides it from the users, kind of thing. I sort of had a question. Are these the blocks that you showed us? Are these the ones that you would recommend sort of testing on any library? Like if some were to pop out of nowhere, are these the ones you would recommend to get an overall feel for how they're doing?
Perhaps, yes. I mean, I did look at a couple of other plugins. I haven't got the notes to hand to which ones, but I chose the blocks I chose. I thought about all the websites that I've built for people and all the websites that I run myself, the sort of functionality that I'd want to do. Like, for example, obviously the simple stuff, having a data table or a product comparison table. I've done that for people on a website. Having the lightbox functionality with a gallery. That's something. If people have got lots of pictures to show, that's a good way of doing it. And to have forms, obviously, because if you want to do a sort of something that's not the standard comment on a blog form, but if you want to do a contact us form, that's quite an important thing that you want to see. So I chose the blocks to kind of represent the sort of functionality I would like to see on a website, and tested them then. And I didn't do so much ones that I thought were a bit, who's ever going to use that, really? My view, obviously. Some people have put a lot of effort into these blocks, and there's probably a good use case for them, but I just chose the ones that I thought would be the ones that I'd want to use myself. If I was picking up another plugin, if someone wants to say, Graham, you should be trying the such and such a block plugin, right? Sure, I'll give it a go, and I'll probably be looking for the similar tick list of functionality and testing that, really.
Mm-hmm.
Did that answer your question, Danielle?
Yeah, definitely, for sure.
Good.
Overall, would you say you were pleasantly surprised? Were you, about what you expected? Were you disappointed? How do you feel about the status of both Core and some of these libraries?
I think with Core, there's been a lot of work done, I know, and I think that was pretty good. I was expecting the simple stuff to be okay, but that was good. So I was pleased about that. It was I was a bit picky about the table with row headers, not being able to do that. With that could be added quite easily, I should imagine. The other ones, I was with Cadence. I am going to sort of mention that actually there's been a lot of effort put in, as I mentioned before, so that's pretty good. So yeah, I was quite pleased, and there's good bits about all of the ones that I featured. I don't want to go down on any of the plugin authors or companies that I've featured here. I just chose those ones because I was asked, I chose these because of ones that I got suggested. I think it's generally slightly better than I expected, but I'm also not surprised to find that there are still some big problems. Keyboard accessibility is such an easy thing to get right, and it's such an important thing. There's many more people who are keyboard only users than there are users of screen readers. A lot of people think that accessibility is all about blind people using screen readers. And yeah, there's obviously that's a big thing, but there are a lot of other people out there who don't use a screen reader, but who do use a keyboard. And things like focus indication and like moving focus when a light box opens and stuff like that. That's sort of kind of easy stuff to get right,
Yeah. Well, I think that's it for our questions. So I just wanted to say thank you. I love people testing stuff and watching them test things. I think it's nice to sort of look over the shoulder of somebody and see how they test versus how I test. And I enjoy it. So thank you.
Thanks, Danielle. Yeah, it's been good. And hopefully everyone found it useful.
Yeah, awesome. So thank you for attending this session with Graham Armfield. You can continue the conversation in the chat or on social media. We have a couple of hashtags, hashtag WPA11YDay and hashtag WPAD2022. We also would appreciate it if you go to wpaccessibility.day/feedback to provide anonymous feedback for our speakers on their presentations. And stay tuned for our next session, Inclusive Coding and Design, comes up next at 8 a.m. UTC and 3 a.m. Central. And while you're waiting, don't forget to visit our sponsors pages to grab virtual swag, enter for a chance to win great prizes, and we will see you right here after the break.